A single day erased an entire chapter of human history. The philosopher Plato wrote of a great civilization lost in one day and night of misfortune, and now startling evidence suggests this was not a myth. This video explores the groundbreaking hypothesis of a global cataclysm 12,800 years ago, an event that may have reset human civilization entirely. By the end, you will see our shared past not as a steady climb, but as a story of survival against an unimaginable cosmic disaster. We will examine why the planet suddenly plunged back into an ice age and how ancient maps might show coastlines lost for millennia. What does it mean for us if the foundations of our world were shaped by catastrophe? That moment of climatic whiplash left a permanent mark in the very ground beneath our feet. Geologists call it the Younger Dryas boundary, a thin, dark stripe of sediment that runs like a scar through the layers of history across the globe. To find it, researchers drill deep into ancient lakebeds, pull up cores of ice from Greenland, and sift through the accumulated dust of millennia. In every sample from North America to Europe and beyond, they find this same distinct line, dated to exactly 12,800 years ago. But it is not just a line of dirt, it is a layer filled with a strange and telling mixture of materials. There are microscopic diamonds known as nanodiamonds, which form under immense pressure and heat. There are tiny spheres of melted glass. There are unusually high concentrations of rare elements like iridium and platinum, materials from Earth's crust. This is not the normal debris of a changing climate. This is the forensic evidence of an impact. Think of it like a crime scene investigator arriving long after an event. They do not see the explosion itself, but they find the shattered glass, the scorch marks, the chemical residues that tell a story of sudden, violent force. The Younger Dryas boundary is that residue on a planetary scale. It tells us that at that precise moment, the sky did not simply grow colder. Something hit, or perhaps many somethings exploded, scattering this telltale debris across the continents and plunging the recovering world back into ice. This layer is the first solid, physical clue that the old stories of fire from the heavens might be more than myth. It is a geological bookmark, and we are only now beginning to read the terrifying chapter it marks. But what could deliver such a planetary signature? The answer lies in a single, startling clue found within that dark layer. In laboratories around the world, researchers sifting through those ancient sediments began to notice an unusual glitter. It was not gold, but something far more telling: platinum. Now, platinum is a precious metal, but here it was not a treasure to be mined. It was a tracer, a cosmic fingerprint. Platinum is exceedingly rare in the Earth's crust. Our planet's surface is simply not rich in it. Yet in space, within certain asteroids and comets, it is found in much greater abundance. Finding a little platinum here and there is normal. Finding a sharp, concentrated spike of it in a thin layer that dates to exactly 12,800 years ago, and finding that same spike in soil cores from California to Syria, from South America to Europe, that is not normal at all. This is not a gradual accumulation over centuries. This is a sudden deposit, as if a cloud of fine, extraterrestrial dust settled across the globe in a geological instant. Think of it like finding a specific, rare pollen from a foreign continent suddenly blanketing an entire forest floor. It tells you the wind changed in a dramatic, singular event, bringing material from a far-off place. The platinum spike is that evidence, but the far-off place is not another continent. It is deep space itself. This single element shifts the entire investigation. It moves the question from what happened on Earth to what happened above it. The presence of this cosmic material, locked in time, points the finger directly at a visitor from the heavens. It suggests that the cataclysm was not born from within our world, but delivered to it. Zooming in on that dark layer reveals a world in miniature, a landscape of microscopic terror. Scattered among the platinum dust and sediment are two other forms of evidence, so small you could fit thousands on the head of a pin, yet they tell a story of unimaginable force. The first are nanodiamonds. These are not the glittering gems in a jewelry store, but their microscopic cousins, crystals of carbon forged under conditions so extreme they are rarely seen on the Earth's surface. They require a combination of tremendous pressure and blistering heat, the kind generated by a massive object slamming into the ground at tens of thousands of miles per hour, or by a titanic airburst exploding with the force of a nuclear weapon. Finding them here is like finding the shattered safety glass at the scene of a high-speed collision. It is a permanent record of a moment of supreme violence. Alongside these diamonds are tiny, perfect spheres of glass, known as microspherules. Picture this: a fireball so immense it instantly vaporizes rock and soil, lifting it high into the atmosphere in a superheated plume. As that molten material rains back down through the cooler air, it solidifies into countless microscopic droplets, each one a frozen tear of the event itself. These microspherules are not found in one valley or one country. They have been identified in that same 12,800-year-old layer from sites across North America, in Europe, and as far away as the Middle East. Their global distribution is the critical clue. It tells us this was not a localized fire or a volcanic eruption in one corner of the world. This was a planetary-scale firestorm, a searing heat that flashed across continents, melting the very surface of the Earth and scattering these glassy witnesses everywhere. Together, the nanodiamonds and the microspherules form a forensic dossier written at the molecular level. They testify to an event of such raw power that it did not just change the climate or alter the landscape. It momentarily changed the fundamental chemistry of the air and soil, leaving behind a permanent, granular record of its fury for us to find millennia later. The evidence is not confined to the microscopic world. It is written in the very earth, in a layer so distinct that archaeologists can see it with their own eyes. Across vast stretches of North America, from Arizona to the Carolinas, researchers digging down through time encounter a sudden, dramatic change in the soil. They call it the black mat. This is a thick, dark, organic-rich layer, like a blanket of ancient peat or swamp muck, and it consistently dates to that same pivotal moment, 12,800 years ago. But its significance is not in its color, it is in what it separates. Directly beneath this black layer, the ground tells a story of life. There are stone tools crafted by human hands, the butchered bones of mammoths and mastodons, and the scattered remains of giant ground sloths and saber-toothed cats. This is a snapshot of a thriving world. Then the black mat falls, and above it, that world is gone. The megafauna vanish. The sophisticated stone tool traditions disappear. The layer itself is a sterile zone, a sudden deposit of watery sediment and charred organic material that contains none of the large animal bones or human artifacts found below. It acts as a geological tombstone, marking not a gradual transition, but an abrupt and total ecological reset. One interpretation is that this mat formed in a single, catastrophic event. A titanic impact or airburst could have triggered immense wildfires that scorched the continent. The resulting ash and soot, combined with the sudden meltwater from destabilized ice sheets, could have created vast floods that swept across the landscape, depositing this uniform layer of destruction. The black mat is therefore more than just dirt. It is a stark, visible line drawn by history itself. On one side, a world of giants and early human cultures. On the other, a silent, scarred landscape and a desperate struggle for survival. It is the boundary between two different Earths, and crossing it meant leaving everything familiar behind. The silence left behind by these vanished giants echoes through the fossil record. For millions of years, North America was a continent of titans, a landscape where woolly mammoths shook the ground, where saber-toothed cats hunted, and where giant ground sloths browsed the treetops. Then, in what seems like a geological blink, they were gone. More than 36 entire groups of these large animals disappeared, not over millennia, but within a few hundred years at most. This is the megafauna extinction enigma, and for decades, two main suspects have been put forward. The first is us, that human hunters, newly arrived on the continent, hunted these animals to oblivion. The second is a changing climate, that the warming world at the end of the last ice age simply altered their habitats too quickly. But both of these theories have troubling gaps. Human populations at the time were small and their technology was simple, making a continent-wide overhunting event difficult to explain. And while the climate was changing, these animals had survived many such shifts before. The timing, however, offers a startling clue. This wave of extinctions did not happen during a slow, gradual warming. It happened precisely as the planet was violently thrown back into a deep freeze, right at the younger Dryas boundary. The alignment is too perfect to ignore. It suggests the true culprit was not a slow pressure, but a sudden, catastrophic shock to the entire system. Some of the mammoth remains tell a particularly haunting story. Bones have been found that are shattered in ways inconsistent with normal predation or natural decay, showing signs of immense, instantaneous force. Even more telling, chemical analysis of their tusks, which grow in layers like tree rings, has revealed strange spikes in concentrations of rare earth elements, materials often associated with extraterrestrial dust and debris. It is as if these animals recorded the very event that ended their world in the final years of their lives. Their disappearance was not an isolated tragedy. These creatures were keystone species, meaning their presence shaped the entire environment around them. Mammoths knocked down trees, creating grasslands. Their massive footsteps churned the soil and spread seeds. When they vanished, entire ecosystems unraveled. Forests grew where plains once were, fire regimes changed, and the very geography of life was rewritten. This was not a series of individual species dying out. It was the catastrophic collapse of a world, an ecological reset so rapid and complete that the continent has never recovered its former majesty. The empty landscapes left behind whisper of a disaster that did not just change the weather, but severed the fundamental connections of life itself. Our own genetic history holds a silent testament to this collapse. While we study the bones of mammoths and the layers of black sediment, the most profound record of the disaster is written within us, in the very blueprint of human DNA. Population geneticists, by tracing the subtle variations in our genes backward through time, have uncovered a startling pattern. They find evidence of what is called a severe bottleneck, a moment when the human family tree was pruned back to just a few fragile branches. This genetic narrowing points to a period centered unmistakably around 12,800 years ago, when the global human population plummeted. It was not a gentle decline, but a precipitous fall, suggesting our ancestors were not merely inconvenienced by a changing climate. They were pushed to the very brink of extinction, fragmented into tiny, isolated bands fighting for survival in a broken world. The evidence is not in ancient tools or campfires, but in the absence of variation, in the genetic echoes of a time when there were suddenly far fewer people to pass on their unique lineages. This was a filter through which only the most resilient, or perhaps simply the luckiest, could pass. On the ground, the archaeological record mirrors this genetic story with chilling clarity. In North America, the sophisticated and widespread Clovis culture, known for their elegantly fluted spear points used to hunt those vanished giants, simply disappears. Their distinctive tools are found beneath the black mat, but never above it. It is as if an entire chapter of human innovation was ripped from the book. This pattern repeats across the globe. In Europe, the vibrant cave art and advanced toolkits of the late Ice Age cultures fade away. In the Levant, settled communities that showed early signs of plant management and complex social structures were abandoned. The loss was not merely demographic, it was cultural, a profound amnesia forced upon humanity. Think of it not just as a reduction in numbers, but as a shattering of networks. The elders who held the knowledge of which plants healed, or how to track the migrations, the artisans who mastered the techniques for crafting fine tools from stone, the storytellers who kept the history of the people, this collective library of survival skills and identity was scattered to the winds. Centuries of accumulated knowledge of technological progress and artistic expression were erased in a geological instant. What followed was not a continuation, but a hard reset. Surviving groups, now small and isolated, were forced to focus entirely on the brutal arithmetic of survival, finding food, securing shelter, and simply enduring. The luxury of specialization, of art, of long-distance trade and communication evaporated. In many regions, the archaeological record shows a return to simpler, more generalized toolkits, a retreat from symbolic expression, and a localization of culture. Human development did not just pause, it was thrown into reverse, set back by centuries, perhaps even millennia, in some parts of the world. This cultural bottleneck may be the catastrophe's most enduring human legacy. It forces us to ask a haunting question: how many songs were never sung? How many stories were lost? How many paths of discovery, in technology or understanding, were closed off forever? The world that emerged after the dust settled and the ice finally retreated was a quieter, poorer place in terms of human culture. Our ancestors were not starting from scratch, but from salvage, piecing together a new future from the fragments of a world that had ended. This mosaic of global clues demanded a unifying explanation. For decades, the sudden freeze, the vanished animals, and the cultural collapse were treated as separate mysteries, each with its own complex and often unsatisfying explanation. But in the early 2000s, a multidisciplinary team of scientists, including geologist James Kennett and nuclear chemist Richard Firestone, looked at the full picture and proposed a radical new paradigm. They called it the younger Dryas impact hypothesis, or more simply, the cosmic impact hypothesis. Their idea was as elegant as it was terrifying. They suggested that around 12,800 years ago, Earth crossed paths with the debris stream of a fragmented comet or perhaps a swarm of asteroid fragments. These objects did not necessarily need to all strike the ground. Instead, they could have detonated in a series of immense airbursts high in the atmosphere or slammed directly into the remaining northern ice sheets. The scale of energy released is almost beyond comprehension. A single one of these events could have unleashed force equivalent to millions of modern nuclear weapons detonating at once. Think of the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history, the explosion of Krakatoa in 1883. Its shockwave circled the globe 7 times. Now imagine an event thousands of times more powerful, happening not over an ocean but over an entire continent. The immediate effects would have been apocalyptic. The thermal radiation from the fireballs would have ignited wildfires across continents, explaining the global layer of charcoal and soot. The titanic shockwaves would have leveled forests and triggered seismic events. If fragments struck the Laurentide ice sheet, which still covered much of North America, they would have instantly vaporized billions of tons of ice, sending torrents of meltwater into the North Atlantic. This sudden freshwater influx is the key to the Big Freeze. It would have shut down the Great Ocean Conveyor Belt, the system of currents that carries warm tropical water northward to moderate the climate of Europe and North America. With this planetary heat pump switched off, the northern hemisphere would have plunged back into ice age conditions within a matter of years, perhaps even faster. In one sweeping narrative, this single hypothesis ties together every strand of evidence. It explains the platinum and iridium from space. It provides the extreme heat and pressure needed to form the nanodiamonds and melt the microspherules. It accounts for the continent-scorching fires that created the black mat. It offers a trigger for the catastrophic flooding and the sudden rerouting of rivers. And it delivers the precise climatic shock needed to explain the megafauna extinction, the human population bottleneck, and the collapse of early cultures. For the first time, the disparate clues from geology, archaeology, paleontology, and climatology were not just related. They were different chapters of the same single, world-altering day. The theory transformed a collection of puzzling facts into a coherent, if horrifying, story. It suggested our ancestors did not merely face a changing climate, they witnessed the sky itself turning against them. With the hypothesis of a cosmic bombardment now on the table, the investigation turns to a crucial question. Where did it hit? The search for ground zero has led scientists on a global detective hunt, examining scars on the landscape that may have been overlooked for millennia. One of the most compelling candidates lies hidden beneath more than a mile of ice in northwest Greenland. Here, radar surveys have revealed a massive, bowl-shaped depression beneath the Hiawatha Glacier. This feature, roughly 19 miles wide, possesses the classic shape of an impact crater, complete with a raised central peak. Its rim is circular and sharp, and the geology beneath it is shattered and deformed. If confirmed, the Hiawatha crater would be one of the largest young impact sites on the planet. The challenge is immense as the crater is sealed under ancient ice, making direct sampling extraordinarily difficult. Yet, sediment washed out from its edges has yielded shocked quartz and other minerals forged by an impact, and preliminary dating suggests it could be very young in geological terms, potentially aligning with the younger Dryas timeline. This hidden giant suggests a terrifying scenario, a direct strike into the northern ice sheets that could have instantly vaporized trillions of tons of ice and triggered the catastrophic floods and climate collapse. Far to the south, along the Atlantic coastal plain of the United States, lies another enigmatic landscape. Scattered from New Jersey to Florida are hundreds of thousands of shallow, elliptical depressions known as the Carolina Bays. They are all aligned in the same northwest to southeast direction, as if a giant rake swept across the land. For decades, their origin was debated, attributed to everything from wind and water to ancient beaver activity. But their sheer number, uniform orientation, and specific shape have led some researchers to propose a more dramatic origin. Could they be the splash marks of a cosmic shotgun blast? The theory suggests that when a large comet fragment disintegrated in the atmosphere, a cloud of smaller, superheated debris rained down at a low angle. Each piece that struck the soft, waterlogged ground could have created one of these liquid-filled basins, with the alignment pointing back toward a common source in the sky over the Great Lakes or Canada. While not every scientist agrees with this impact-related model, the bays remain a haunting and pervasive feature, a potential testament to a reign of fire that scarred an entire coastline. The search extends across the Atlantic. In the Chiemgau region of southeast Germany, researchers have identified a field of strange craters and a layer of sediment rich in impact-related materials, like nanodiamonds and melted metals dated to the Bronze Age. While younger than the younger Dryas, it shows the kind of regional devastation a smaller cosmic airburst can cause, offering a scale model for a far larger event. Similarly, studies in the Syrian desert have uncovered a layer of glassy silica, known as desert glass, which forms at temperatures so high they can only be created by a massive atmospheric explosion or a ground impact. These widespread, localized sites hint that the 12,800-year-old event may not have been a single strike, but a swarm, a cluster of explosions and impacts across multiple continents. This paints a picture of a fragmented comet like the one that struck Jupiter in 1994, but entering Earth's atmosphere in a procession of fireballs. The lack of one definitive continent-sized crater might not be a weakness in the theory, but a clue to its very nature. We may not be looking for a single bullet hole, but for the scattered pattern of a cosmic blast that shattered in the sky. Each candidate site, from the icy depths of Greenland to the sandy bays of the Carolinas, adds another piece to a terrifying mosaic, helping us map the moment our world changed forever. The sky itself had become an agent of winter. In the wake of the firestorms and floods, a deeper and more pervasive chill set in, one that would grip the northern world for over 1,000 years. This was not merely a cold snap, but a full-scale reversal of the planet's natural recovery. The delicate machinery of Earth's climate, which had been steadily warming out of the last ice age, was given a violent and decisive shove. The trigger was likely the immense volume of fine debris, soot from continent-spanning wildfires, dust from pulverized rock and ice, and water vapor from vaporized glaciers, that the impact or airbursts lofted high into the stratosphere. There, this veil of particles acted like a global sunshade, reflecting sunlight back into space and drastically cooling the surface below. Temperatures in some regions, particularly across Europe and North America, plummeted by as much as 10 degrees Celsius within a single decade. To put that in perspective, the difference between today's global average temperature and the depths of the last ice age is only about 6 degrees. This was a climatic earthquake, a sudden deep freeze that made previously habitable lands harsh and unforgiving. But the atmosphere was only one part of the story. The true engine of our planet's climate is the ocean, a vast, slow-moving heat pump that circulates warmth from the tropics to the poles. The most critical part of this system is the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the powerful current that includes the Gulf Stream. It works because warm, salty water flows north from the equator, releases its heat to the air over the North Atlantic, keeping places like Britain and Scandinavia far milder than they should be for their latitude, and then, now cooler and denser, sinks into the deep ocean to begin its long return journey south. This entire process depends on a precise balance of temperature and salinity, and that balance was shattered. The cataclysm likely delivered a catastrophic influx of cold, fresh water into the North Atlantic, from the sudden melting of ice sheets struck by fragments or from the torrential floods that scoured the continents. This fresh water acted like a lid of cold, light water on top of the dense, salty ocean. It prevented the normal sinking process. The great conveyor belt stuttered, then stalled. With the heat pump switched off, the northern hemisphere's descent into ice age conditions became inevitable and rapid. The consequences of this double blow, a darkened sky and a stalled ocean, echoed for generations. The Younger Dryas period, named after a small white Arctic flower that spread south as the ice advanced, became a 1,200-year winter imposed upon a world that had been warming. Glaciers that had been retreating for centuries began to grind forward once more. Forests died back, replaced by tundra and steppe. The seasonal rhythms that plants, animals, and humans all depended upon became unreliable, then hostile. For the scattered bands of survivors, this was the ultimate prolonged hardship. The initial disaster of fire and quake might have lasted hours or days. The climate catastrophe that followed defined lifetimes. It locked humanity into a struggle not just against the visible scars on the land, but against a persistent, pervasive cold that reshaped the very possibilities of survival. This was the true reset, a planetary-scale event that did not just change the weather for a season, but rewired the fundamental operating system of the global climate for over a millennium. The world that emerged on the other side was irrevocably different, and the path of human civilization would have to find a new way forward in its chill. These ancient stories ripple across every continent, a shared human memory written in water. From the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, where the gods send a flood to wipe out humanity, to the biblical narrative of Noah's Ark, the theme is universal. The Maya spoke of a great deluge that ended a previous world age. Aboriginal traditions in Australia tell of sea levels rising to drown sacred coastal lands. The indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest have vivid stories of a time when the water rose until only the mountaintops remained. This is not a case of one story spreading. It is a chorus of voices from isolated cultures, all singing about the same profound trauma. When a memory is this persistent and this widespread, it begs us to listen, to ask what real event could have left such a deep scar on the collective human psyche. The answer may lie in the very geography we now take for granted. At the end of the last ice age for thousands of years, massive glaciers locked away an immense volume of the planet's water. Sea levels were roughly 400 feet lower than they are today. This exposed vast continental shelves, rich plains and fertile river valleys that were literally the coastlines of the ancient world. Imagine entire landscapes the size of small countries, places where generations of our ancestors lived, hunted, and built their communities, now lying hundreds of feet beneath the ocean's surface. The melting of the ice sheets was not always a gentle, steady process. Geological evidence shows periods of extremely rapid rise, where the oceans could climb by several feet per decade, a rate that would be terrifying to witness. A single lifetime could see the relentless water claim miles of familiar territory, forcing a constant, desperate retreat. Now, layer onto that natural but dramatic rise the possibility of a catastrophic trigger. If a cosmic impact violently destabilized the remaining ice sheets, as the hypothesis suggests, it could have caused sudden, colossal discharges of meltwater. We are not talking about rivers swelling, but about catastrophic outburst floods of unimaginable scale, events that would have scoured entire regions and sent tsunami-like waves across ocean basins. The resulting rapid sea level surge would have been a world-altering event. Coastal societies would have seen their homelands vanish beneath the waves within generations, perhaps even within a single elder's lifetime. The psychological impact is hard to overstate. The very ground beneath their feet, the landmarks that defined their world, the hunting grounds and freshwater sources, all consumed by an advancing, unstoppable wall of water. This was not a simple change of address, it was the literal end of a world. Such an experience would burn itself into cultural memory, becoming the central catastrophe around which identity is formed. The stories that emerged were not literal history books, but mythic narratives crafted to make sense of the senseless. They framed the event as a divine punishment or a cosmic reset, a way to explain why the old world was lost and a new, harder one had begun. The recurring symbols in these myths are telling: the warning ignored, the single family or tribe saved on a boat or a high mountain, the animals preserved, the rainbow promise that it will not happen again. These are the elements of trauma processing, of finding hope and meaning after an unthinkable disaster. They represent a deep-seated human need to transform a geological event into a story with moral and spiritual significance. So when we hear these flood myths from every corner of the globe, we are likely hearing the echoes of a real geological event, filtered through generations of storytelling. They are not proof of a single worldwide flood that covered every mountain, but they are powerful testimony to a shared experience of catastrophic loss, of coastlines drowning and continents shrinking, a memory of the day the water won. Plato's account of Atlantis is often the first story that comes to mind when we think of lost civilizations. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE, the philosopher describes a powerful island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a place of immense wealth, advanced engineering, and formidable military might. This civilization, he writes, attempted to conquer the ancient world but was ultimately defeated by the ancestors of the Athenians. Its fate, however, was not decided by battle. The story concludes with violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the entire island of Atlantis sank beneath the sea, vanishing forever. For centuries, this tale has been analyzed as a moral allegory, a warning about the hubris of nations. Yet, when we look closely at the details Plato provides, a different possibility emerges, one that aligns eerily with the geological timeline we have been exploring. Plato is very specific about the timing. He states through his characters that this catastrophe occurred 9,000 years before the time of the Athenian lawmaker Solon, who lived around 600 BCE. That places the sinking of Atlantis at approximately 9,600 years before Plato, or roughly 11,600 years ago from our present day. This date sits remarkably close to the onset of the Younger Dryas period, 12,800 years ago. The discrepancy of over a millennium is not necessarily a deal breaker in the realm of ancient chronology, where round numbers and oral transmission can easily shift timelines. The alignment is close enough to be provocative. Could Plato have been recording a distant, garbled memory of a real event? The description of the cataclysm itself is strikingly geological. He speaks of extraordinary earthquakes and floods, a sudden submergence of land. This does not sound like a localized tsunami or a typical storm. It sounds like a rapid, regional, or even global geological upheaval, precisely the kind of event that would accompany a cosmic impact and the subsequent rapid sea level rise. The idea that an entire advanced culture could be lost is no longer a fantastical notion. We now know that at the end of the last ice age, vast and potentially habitable lands like Doggerland, which connected Britain to Europe, and the Sunda Shelf, which linked Southeast Asia, were swallowed by the rising oceans. If a sophisticated society existed on such a vulnerable coastline, its disappearance would be total, leaving no ruins on dry land for archaeologists to find, only a blank space on the map and a story passed down through generations. Some researchers propose that Atlantis was not a single island, but a memory of a broader maritime culture that thrived on those now drowned continental shelves. This culture would have possessed knowledge of astronomy, navigation, and architecture suited to their environment, which to later, simpler societies might have seemed magically advanced. Their sudden loss as the seas rushed in would have been a trauma felt across the connected world of the time, a story told and retold at countless campfires for thousands of years until it finally reached the ears of an Egyptian priest, then Solon, and finally Plato. He may have framed it as a philosophical lesson, but the core of the story, a great power destroyed by the earth and sea in a single terrible day, carries the unmistakable echo of a real catastrophe. It suggests that the myth of Atlantis is not merely a fiction, but a cultural fossil, preserving the shape of a historical truth long after the details have been worn away by time. The silence left by a drowned world demanded a response. In the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, a hill known as Göbekli Tepe rises from the plains, and what lies buried there is nothing short of a historical shockwave. Dated to around 11,600 years ago, this site was built just as the long winter of the Younger Dryas was finally releasing its grip. Its discovery forced a complete rewrite of the human story, for here, carved from solid limestone, are enormous stone pillars arranged in great circles, some weighing over 10 tons, each one adorned with breathtakingly intricate carvings of animals, symbols, and abstract shapes. This is the world's oldest known megalithic temple, a structure of staggering ambition and artistry. The official narrative tells us the builders were simple hunter-gatherers, nomadic bands who followed herds of wild animals. But that explanation strains against the evidence. Erecting these pillars required not just brute strength, but sophisticated engineering, advanced stoneworking skills, and most importantly, a highly organized social structure. You do not coordinate the labor of hundreds of people, quarry and transport multi-ton blocks across miles, and execute precise artistic designs without a shared vision, a hierarchy of leadership, and a powerful, unifying purpose. This level of complexity was not supposed to exist for another 5,000 years. Göbekli Tepe feels like a brilliant anachronism, a masterpiece appearing in what we thought was the sketchbook of human development. So where did this sudden leap in knowledge and organization come from? A growing number of researchers are asking a provocative question. Could Göbekli Tepe be the work of survivors, or the direct descendants of survivors from a culture that was lost in the Cataclysm? The timeline is compelling. Built just a few centuries after the Younger Dryas cold snap ended, it emerges from the archaeological record like a beacon lit after a long, dark night. Perhaps it was not the first flowering of complex society, but a deliberate revival. The symbolism carved into every pillar offers a tantalizing clue. The reliefs are dominated not by images of domesticated plants or animals, which would come later, but by a menagerie of powerful, often dangerous wild creatures, scorpions, foxes, vultures, and lions. These are the icons of a wild, untamed world, the very world that had just nearly erased humanity. Some researchers interpret this not as random decoration, but as an encoded message, a preservation of knowledge about the animals and perhaps even the celestial events associated with the traumatic past. The site's very function may hold the key. There is little evidence that people lived at Göbekli Tepe year-round. Instead, it appears to have been a ceremonial gathering place, a destination for pilgrimage. Groups from across the region would have converged there at specific times, drawn by a shared belief or a shared memory. This suggests its primary purpose was not practical, but psychological and cultural. It served as an anchor point in a shattered world, a place to reaffirm community, transmit essential stories, and forge a new collective identity from the fragments of the old. In this light, Göbekli Tepe can be seen as a monumental act of remembrance and resilience. It is as if the survivors, having passed through the filter of catastrophe, gathered their remaining knowledge and their most skilled artisans to build something permanent, something that would outlast them. They carved their warnings, their memories of the beasts and the skies into stone, ensuring that the story of the world that was, and the disaster that ended it, would never be forgotten. It stands not as the beginning of civilization, but as a conscious new beginning, a defiant statement carved in limestone that even after a cosmic reset, humanity could still reach for the monumental. Standing guard on the Giza Plateau, the Great Sphinx presents a geological riddle written in stone. Its massive limestone body and the walls of the pit from which it was carved are marked by deep, undulating channels and vertical fissures. To the untrained eye, they might look like simple wear from wind and sand. But to a geologist, these patterns tell a specific story. They are classic signs of water erosion, the kind caused not by occasional drizzle, but by thousands of years of heavy, persistent rainfall. This presents a profound chronological problem. Egypt is a desert and has been one for the last 5,000 years. The last time the region experienced a climate wet enough to produce this type of weathering was at the end of the last ice age, over 12,000 years ago. This observation forms the core of the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis, first brought to wide attention by geologist Robert Schoch in the early 1990s. His analysis suggested that the deepest erosion on the Sphinx enclosure could only be explained by precipitation that predated dynastic Egypt by many millennia. This would mean the monument we see today is not simply 4,500 years old, but perhaps more than twice that age, a relic from a time before the sands claimed the land. If this geological reading is correct, it forces a staggering historical implication. The Sphinx, or at least its core body, would have been carved not by the pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BCE, but by a culture flourishing during or even before the Younger Dryas period. This would be a civilization possessing not only the artistic vision to conceive such a colossus, but the advanced engineering and social organization to execute it. They would have been monument builders in an epoch we currently describe as pre-civilization, a time of supposed hunter-gatherers. Where did they come from? And more hauntingly, where did they go? The hypothesis suggests a possible answer in the Cataclysm itself. A sophisticated society existing on the vulnerable edges of a changing world, perhaps along those now drowned coastlines, could have been fragmented or obliterated by the fires, floods, and the thousand-year winter that followed. Their grandest surviving work, the Sphinx, would then stand not as a beginning, but as a lonely sentinel from a forgotten chapter, its body scarred by the very rains that marked the end of its maker's world. This transforms the Sphinx from a symbol of pharaonic power into a potential artifact of cultural survival, a monument begun by one lost world and perhaps only rediscovered and refaced by another millennia later. The erosion on its stones becomes more than just weathering. It is a clock pointing to a different dawn, challenging us to reconsider not just a statue, but the entire timeline of human achievement. The stones of Göbekli Tepe and the Sphinx are not the only artifacts whispering of a forgotten age. There exists another form of evidence, not carved in rock, but drawn on parchment and animal skin, a silent testament to geographical knowledge that should not have existed. Among the most famous is the Piri Reis map, compiled by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer in 1513. In its margins, he wrote that he had drawn it from 20 older source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. The map is fascinating for many reasons, but one detail stands out with shocking clarity. It shows the northern coastline of a southern landmass with a precision that baffles historians. This coastline bears a startling resemblance to the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica, but with a profound problem. Antarctica has been encased in a thick ice cap for at least 12,000 years. Its true coastal outline was not officially mapped with any accuracy until the 20th century, after the development of seismic sounding technology. How could a 16th century mapmaker, working from ancient sources, possibly depict a continent that would remain undiscovered for another 3 centuries? And show its shape as it exists beneath the ice, not as it appears with its glacial covering. This is not an isolated anomaly. Other medieval portolan charts, like the Orontius Phineus map of 1531, also depict an ice-free Antarctica with detailed river systems and inland seas, features that have been invisible to human eyes for millennia. Even more compelling are maps like the one drawn by the Turkish cartographer Hacı Ahmed in 1559, which seems to show a land bridge connecting Siberia to Alaska, a dry passage that existed only when sea levels were much lower at the end of the last ice age. These are not simple mistakes or fantastical guesses. The accuracy of certain latitudes and longitudes, the recognition of continental shelf boundaries now underwater, and the consistent portrayal of landforms unknown to the era of their creation point to a single, staggering conclusion. They are copies of copies, the faded echoes of an original, sophisticated cartographic tradition that mapped the world not as it was in the Middle Ages, but as it was over 12,000 years ago, before the Great Melt and the Cataclysm reshaped the globe. This suggests the existence of a prehistorical civilization, or a network of cultures, with advanced seafaring and surveying capabilities. They must have possessed the mathematical understanding for spherical projection, the navigational skill to chart vast oceans, and the organizational capacity to compile this data into a coherent world picture. Their maps would have been among their most precious possessions, the keys to a global network of trade and communication. Then, the disaster struck. The cataclysm that brought fire and ice would have shattered this network. The rising seas drowned their port cities and coastal observatories. The surviving knowledge, no longer understood in its original context, became a sacred relic. These priceless charts were preserved not for navigation, but as heirlooms of a lost golden age, copied and recopied by scribes who no longer comprehended what they were drawing. They were passed down through secret libraries from Alexandria to Constantinople, surviving wars and fires by sheer chance, until they finally fell into the hands of cartographers like Piri Reis, who faithfully incorporated these ancient, mysterious coastlines into a modern map, unknowingly preserving a snapshot of a world that had vanished beneath the waves. These maps are therefore more than historical curiosities. They are cultural memory in cartographic form. They tell us that before the reset, humanity had already looked upon the whole earth, had named its continents and sailed its seas. The disaster did not just destroy cities and people, it severed a global connection and erased a planetary consciousness. The maps are the fragile, paper-thin ghosts of that lost unity, challenging us to wonder how much was truly forgotten and what it meant to see the world as one, only to have that vision buried by ice and time. This sudden, global pivot from foraging to farming is one of history's deepest mysteries. For over 200,000 years, our ancestors lived as hunters and gatherers, moving with the seasons and the herds. Then, almost as if on a shared signal, this way of life was abandoned in multiple, unconnected parts of the world. In the Fertile Crescent, wild wheat and barley were brought under cultivation. In China, rice and millet were domesticated. In Mesoamerica, it was maize and squash. In the Andes, potatoes and quinoa. This was not a slow, inevitable evolution. The archaeological record shows it as a rapid, revolutionary shift, beginning almost precisely as the long winter of the younger Dryas finally receded, around 11,500 years ago. Why would so many different cultures, separated by vast oceans and mountain ranges, all decide at roughly the same moment to undertake the immensely difficult work of taming the land? The traditional explanation is one of opportunity, that a warming climate created ideal conditions and human ingenuity naturally seized the chance. But this timing is precisely what makes the Cataclysm hypothesis so compelling. Perhaps agriculture was not born from opportunity, but from absolute necessity, a desperate innovation forged in the aftermath of disaster. Consider the world those survivors inhabited. The great herds of mammoth, bison, and other megafauna were gone, hunted to extinction or wiped out by the changing ecology. The once rich coastal plains and river valleys where generations had foraged were now submerged beneath rising seas. The climate, though warming, was still unstable and unpredictable. The traditional, mobile lifestyle of the hunter-gatherer depends on abundance and reliable routes. But abundance had been shattered. The old maps were useless, the old hunting grounds silent. Scattered bands of people now found themselves trapped in smaller, less productive refuges, like the hilly flanks of the Fertile Crescent or the highland valleys of Peru. With population pressures growing and large game hunting no longer viable, the equation of survival changed completely. Innovation was no longer a luxury, it was the only path forward. The solution they found was radical: to stop following food and to start making it stay in one place. This was not a conscious plan to build civilization. It was a series of desperate experiments in survival. People began to selectively protect the most useful wild plants, weeding around them, saving their seeds, and later deliberately sowing them in cleared ground. They began to corral the few remaining manageable animals like wild goats and sheep, not initially for milk or wool, but as living larders, a guaranteed source of meat that could be controlled and protected. This process was backbreaking, risky, and initially offered a poorer diet and more grueling labor than the old foraging life. Why would anyone choose it unless the alternative was starvation? The Cataclysm hypothesis suggests they did not choose it. They were forced into it by the collapse of their entire world. Agriculture, then, may be the ultimate adaptation to scarcity, a cultural technology that emerged from the deepest hardship. It allowed human groups to extract far more calories from a much smaller area of land, supporting larger, more settled populations even in a depleted environment. This shift from extensive to intensive resource use was a direct answer to a planet that could no longer support the old, wide-roaming ways. The independent emergence of farming on multiple continents is no longer a bizarre coincidence under this light. It becomes a predictable pattern of convergent evolution. Just as unrelated animals in different deserts evolve similar ways to conserve water, unrelated human societies facing the same global crisis. The loss of large game, the drowning of coastal resources, and climatic instability evolved the same fundamental solution: settled agriculture. Each region worked with the local plants and animals available, which is why wheat emerged in the Middle East and maize in the Americas. But the underlying driver was the same: catastrophic change on a planetary scale. This reframes the Neolithic revolution. It was not the dawn of civilization, but the second act. It was humanity's collective reboot, a slow, arduous process of rebuilding a stable food supply from the ground up after the previous system had been obliterated. The seeds we planted were not just for grain, they were for a new kind of future, one rooted in place, born from resilience, and defined by our response to a forgotten cataclysm. The stars were not just lights in the sky, they were a library. Scattered across the globe, the monumental works of our ancestors reveal a startling command of celestial mechanics, a precision that seems to defy their presumed technological simplicity. Take the Great Circle of Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain. Its massive sarsen stones are arranged to perfectly frame the sunrise on the summer solstice, a feat requiring generations of meticulous observation and record-keeping. But this is merely one volume in a much larger global archive. Far to the east, the Maya of Central America developed a calendar system of such complexity it still inspires awe. Their famous long count calendar, which sparked so much speculation about its end date in 2012, began a grand cycle in the year 3114 before the Common Era. While that date falls within recorded history, some scholars studying the underlying mathematics suggest its starting point may not mark a creation myth, but could instead be a calculated reference to a far older, real celestial event, a fixed point in deep time from which to measure future cycles. This implies the Maya were not inventing from zero, but were working within an inherited framework of astronomical knowledge. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for this idea comes from a site we have already visited, Göbekli Tepe. Researchers analyzing the layout of its stone pillars have proposed that the entire complex was deliberately aligned with specific stars, particularly those of the constellation Cygnus, as they would have appeared in the sky around 10,000 years before the Common Era. This is not a rough alignment but a precise one, suggesting its builders were not merely noting the passage of seasons, but were tracking the slow, majestic wobble of Earth's axis over millennia, a cycle known as precession. Understanding precession requires noticing changes in the night sky so gradual they are imperceptible within a single human lifetime. To encode this knowledge into architecture implies a tradition of observation spanning centuries, if not millennia. This presents a profound puzzle. The societies officially credited with these constructions are portrayed as early farmers or hunter-gatherers, cultures we assume were focused on the daily struggle for survival. Where did they find the time, the continuity, and the intellectual framework for such advanced celestial science? The gap between their presumed lifestyle and their demonstrated knowledge feels impossibly wide. One compelling resolution is that this astronomy was not developed from scratch by these cultures, but was a surviving fragment of a much older scientific tradition. Imagine a scenario where a sophisticated precursor culture, one that had mapped the heavens over countless generations, was shattered by the cataclysm. The survivors, carrying this priceless knowledge as part of their cultural inheritance, would have preserved its core principles as a sacred duty. For them, astronomy would not have been an abstract science, but a vital tool for survival and meaning. It would have been the discipline that explained the terrifying event they had witnessed, the fire from the sky. It would have provided a predictable order to the cosmos, a way to mark time and navigate a transformed world when all other landmarks were gone. The careful alignments at Göbekli Tepe or the mathematical elegance of the Maya calendar may therefore be echoes of a lost golden age of discovery. They represent a legacy of cosmic understanding, passed down through priestly lineages or encoded in myth and monument, ensuring that even if the cities fell and the books turned to dust, the story written in the stars would not be forgotten. This knowledge was kept alive not for curiosity's sake, but because it was understood at a visceral level that the heavens held both the key to their past trauma and the blueprint for their future continuity. The heavens themselves may have been alive with a different kind of fire. Beyond the physical impacts and the climatic collapse, another layer of memory survives in the world's oldest art, pointing to an event so visually spectacular it reshaped human imagination. This leads us to a more controversial interpretation known as the electric universe hypothesis. Its proponents suggest that the Cataclysm 12,800 years ago was not merely a kinetic bombardment of rock and ice, but an electrifying encounter. They propose that as fragments of a comet or other planetary body passed extremely close to Earth, the intense electrical charge difference between these objects and our planet's atmosphere could have triggered colossal plasma discharges. These would not be simple lightning bolts, but vast, luminous formations arcing across the sky, perhaps even connecting celestial bodies in a temporary, terrifying circuit. To the people below, the sky would have become a canvas of unimaginable terror and beauty, etched with shapes of fire. And it is here that the theory makes its most intriguing claim that our ancestors did not just experience this event, they painted it. Across the globe, from the caves of Europe to the rocks of the American Southwest and the Australian outback, we find recurring, enigmatic symbols. These are not just animals or handprints. They include strange, rayed figures that seem to emanate light, concentric circles that pulse with energy, and most persistently, immense serpentine forms coiling across the rock face. Mainstream archaeology often interprets these as shamanic visions or representations of local creatures, but from the electric universe perspective, these are literal recordings. The rayed figures could depict the towering pillars of plasma, the circles might represent the glowing orbs of celestial bodies, and the great serpents in the sky could be attempts to draw the twisting, filamentary arcs of electrical discharge, phenomena that would have looked like living, cosmic dragons made of fire. This interpretation attempts to solve a persistent puzzle in comparative mythology. Why do cultures with no possible contact share such similar stories of gods and monsters doing battle in the heavens? The Babylonian god Marduk battles the serpentine Tiamat. The Norse god Thor fights the world serpent Jörmungandr. In the Americas, feathered serpents like Quetzalcoatl are central to creation myths. The descriptions are consistently vivid: thunderbolts as weapons, fiery dragons in the sky, the heavens torn asunder. If these are simply invented stories, the convergence is remarkable. But if they are rooted in a shared global trauma, a real atmospheric spectacle that accompanied the impact winter, then the convergence makes a different kind of sense. The myths become a form of psychological processing, a way for shattered societies to explain the unexplainable, to give narrative form to the apocalyptic light show that heralded the end of their world. They encoded the memory not as a dry scientific report, but as a cosmic drama where the forces of chaos, represented by the serpent, were battled by forces of order, represented by the sky god with his thunderbolt. While this electrical component remains highly speculative and is met with deep skepticism by mainstream physicists, its value may lie less in its mechanics and more in its cultural insight. It challenges us to look at ancient art and legend not as mere fantasy, but as potential eyewitness accounts from the edge of extinction. The recurring symbols of serpents and radiant figures might be humanity's first attempt at journalism, a desperate effort to say, "This is what we saw when the sky broke open." Whether the cause was electrical or simply the blinding glare of incoming debris, the psychological impact of such a celestial display would have been profound, branding itself onto collective memory and forever changing how humanity saw its place beneath the heavens. The symbols on cave walls and the alignments of stone circles ask us to look up, but this same scientific curiosity also asks us to look down, to consider the very ground beneath our feet in a radically new way. A provocative thought experiment known as the Silurian Hypothesis turns the search for lost civilizations inside out. Originally conceived by astrophysicists as a tool for detecting alien industrial societies on distant exoplanets, it poses a simple, haunting question. If an advanced civilization rose on Earth millions of years before our own, what tangible evidence would actually survive for us to find today? The answer is startlingly little. Our modern world of steel and concrete, of sprawling cities and deep mines, is far more fragile than we like to believe. Geological time is a great eraser. Plate tectonics subducts ocean floors, glaciers grind mountains to dust, and sedimentation buries entire landscapes under thousands of feet of new rock. Within a few million years, nearly every physical structure we have built would be reduced to anonymous layers in the strata, indistinguishable from natural formations. This is not science fiction, it is planetary physics. Apply this sobering logic to a much shorter time frame, to a potential civilization that existed not millions, but merely 12,800 years ago, and the implications are profound. Such a culture, even if technologically sophisticated, would not leave behind skyscrapers or superhighways for us to excavate. Its most likely legacy would be a collection of subtle, debated anomalies. We might find strange chemical spikes in ice cores or sediment layers, like the platinum and nanodiamonds we have already discussed. We might discover rare, long-lasting synthetic materials, something akin to plastic polymers, surviving as microscopic fragments. Its greatest works of landscape engineering, like canals or terraced agriculture, would have long since been weathered, overgrown, or submerged, appearing to us as curious but natural features. This thought experiment does not prove such a civilization existed. Instead, it performs a crucial service. It dismantles our arrogance about the permanence of our own footprint and expands our imagination about what evidence might actually look like. It challenges the assumption that absence of obvious, towering ruins means absence of complexity. A society that mastered astronomy, seafaring, and monument building, but did so with organic materials, renewable technologies, and a deep integration with its environment, could vanish with startling thoroughness. Its libraries would rot, its wooden cities would return to the soil, and its greatest achievements might only be echoed in the myths and astronomical knowledge preserved by its scattered descendants. The Silurian Hypothesis forces us to listen more carefully to those echoes. It suggests that the clues we have been examining, the aligned stones, the impossible maps, the worldwide flood myths, may not be fragments of a primitive past, but the weathered shoreline of a lost continent of human achievement. Our search is not for a city of gold, but for a shadow in the geological record, a pattern in the data that whispers, someone was here before, and they knew more than we have dared to believe. That collective memory needed a vessel to survive the long silence. The most fragile yet resilient technology our ancestors possessed was not made of stone, but of breath and voice. For over 12,000 years, the story of the Cataclysm had to travel without a single written word, passing from elder to child across more than 400 generations. To our modern minds, this seems an impossible feat, a game of telephone stretched across millennia where the original message would surely be lost. Yet, a growing body of anthropological research reveals that many oral traditions are not games of telephone at all. They are meticulously engineered memory systems. Look to the Aboriginal cultures of Australia, whose stories have been passed down for what science confirms is an astonishing length of time. Specific narratives describe coastal features, now submerged, that match the geography of the continent when sea levels were dramatically lower over 10,000 years ago. These are not vague legends of a great flood. They are precise accounts of particular bays, river mouths, and islands that vanished beneath the waves, preserved with topographic accuracy. How is this possible? The answer lies in the sacred protocol surrounding these stories. They are not told casually or freely altered. They are performed within strict ceremonial contexts, with specific rhythms, songs, dances, and visual aids like rock art serving as mnemonic devices. Each teller is a custodian trained from childhood, responsible for transmitting the narrative exactly as it was received. The story becomes a living archive, its structure designed to prevent corruption. The event it describes is woven into the very identity of the people, into their laws, their relationship to the land, and their understanding of the cosmos. To change the story is to break a sacred covenant with the past. Now, apply this understanding to the event we have been exploring. A global cataclysm of fire, ice, and rising water would not have been just another story. It would have been the story, the foundational trauma that defined the before and the after for every surviving community. Its memory would have been given the highest priority, encoded with the most rigorous protocols. It would be performed at the most important gatherings, linked to the movement of specific stars as a calendar reminder, and embodied in the most significant rituals. The global consistency of the flood myth archetype from Mesopotamia to the Andes, from the Pacific Northwest to ancient China, is the evidence of this process working on a planetary scale. Isolated cultures with no possible contact for thousands of years all preserve a core narrative of a world-destroying deluge, a few survivors, and a rebirth. They are not copying each other. They are independently reporting the same catastrophic experience, each culture filtering it through its own landscape and cosmology, but retaining the essential, terrifying truth. The serpent or dragon in the sky, the rain of fire, the great winter, these are not mere fantasy. They are the surviving sensory details of an event that overwhelmed all human understanding, translated into the symbolic language of myth because no other language was sufficient. These stories, then, are far more than folklore. They are the longest-running data transmission in human history, a whisper from the deepest past that says, "We were here, this happened, do not forget." They represent humanity's first and most enduring act of historical preservation, proving that our ancestors were not primitive in their thinking, but profoundly sophisticated in their need to warn the future. The myths are the echo of the impact, still reverberating in the shared psyche of our species, reminding us that our past is not a smooth line, but a story punctuated by stars falling from the sky. Every great discovery in science begins not with a chorus of agreement, but with a single, challenging voice. The hypothesis of a global cataclysm 12,800 years ago is no exception. For every researcher who sees a cosmic fingerprint in the platinum layer, another raises a skeptical hand, pointing to the immense complexity of Earth's own systems. This vigorous debate is not a sign of weakness in the idea, but a testament to its significance. It forces the evidence to withstand the most intense scrutiny, and in doing so, refines our understanding of what truly happened. The central criticism from many mainstream geologists and archaeologists is one of alternative explanations. They argue that the key pieces of evidence can be interpreted in more conventional ways. Those microscopic diamonds and the spike in rare metals like platinum, they suggest, could have origins closer to home. Intense volcanic eruptions can produce nanodiamonds under certain conditions, and the Earth's mantle itself holds reservoirs of platinum that can be brought to the surface through geological processes over long periods. The concern about contamination is also serious. Could these materials have been introduced into the ancient sediment layers by more recent water flow, or even by the tools used to collect the samples? Skeptics urge caution, reminding us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the natural world is full of surprises that can mimic the signs of an impact. When it comes to the vanished megafauna and the collapse of early human cultures, many scientists find the traditional explanations still sufficient. They point to the well-documented arrival of skilled human hunters in new environments, a pressure that large, slow-breeding animals had never faced before. Combine this with the significant climate upheavals that marked the end of the Ice Age, a period of rapid warming followed by the sudden cold snap of the younger Dryas itself, and you have a powerful one-two punch for ecosystems. In this view, the disappearance of the mammoths and the retreat of the Clovis people were tragic, but not necessarily mysterious. They were the result of converging environmental stresses and human activity, a complex ecological shift rather than a single day of doom. This scientific controversy is essential. It is the engine of progress. Each critique pushes proponents of the impact hypothesis to seek better data, to find the evidence in more places, and to refine their models. It asks hard questions. If it was a comet swarm, why is the crater record so sparse? Can the timing of the climate shift be linked definitively to an extraterrestrial trigger, or was it primarily an internal oscillation of the ocean atmosphere system? This back and forth is not a fight to be won, but a process to be honored. It highlights that the story of our deep past is not a closed book, but a living document. New cores drilled from ocean floors, more precise dating techniques, and fresh analyses of ancient soils are constantly adding lines to the narrative. Some data will support the impact theory, other findings will challenge it. This dynamic tension is what science is for, a collective effort to move closer to truth by questioning every assumption. It reminds us that our history is not a simple tale, but a puzzle with pieces still being uncovered, where even our most compelling stories must remain open to revision. The past is not silent, it is frozen in time. To hear its story, scientists journey to the most remote places on Earth, drilling deep into the ancient ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica. What they pull up are not just cylinders of ice, but exquisite time capsules, layered archives of our planet's atmosphere. Each year's snowfall compresses into a distinct band, trapping within it tiny bubbles of ancient air, along with dust, volcanic ash, and chemical particles that were floating in the sky when that snow fell. By analyzing these pristine cores, researchers can read the planet's vital signs year by year, stretching back over 100,000 years. When they examine the layers corresponding to 12,800 years ago, they find a shocking anomaly. There is a dramatic spike in a chemical called ammonium. In the context of an ice core, ammonium is a key signature of vast, continent-spanning wildfires. Its sudden and intense presence at the younger Dryas boundary is like finding a layer of soot between the pages of a history book, a direct chemical record of the global firestorm that likely followed the cosmic event. This is not an inference from charred soil, it is the atmosphere's own testimony, perfectly preserved. While ice cores chronicle the sky, another natural recorder keeps time on the ground. The Humble Tree Ring is one of science's most precise calendars. Through dendrochronology, the study of these rings, we can reconstruct past climates with astonishing detail. Each ring represents 1 year of a tree's life. A wide ring indicates a year of good growth with ample warmth and rain. A narrow, cramped ring tells a story of hardship, drought, or unseasonable cold. Scientists have built continuous chronologies using incredibly long-lived trees, like the bristlecone pines of North America, and by overlapping patterns from ancient bog oaks preserved in European wetlands. When they examine trees that were alive at the end of the last ice age, they see something startling. Right at the transition into the younger Dryas, the rings show severe frost damage. This is not a gradual cooling. It is evidence of a sudden, catastrophic plunge in temperature, a shock so violent it damaged living cells and stunted growth across entire forests. The trees, in their silent, wooden language, record the instant the long winter began. Together, these natural archives allow us to build a timeline of disaster with forensic precision. The ice cores tell us the air filled with the smoke of burning continents. The tree rings tell us the growing seasons collapsed in a flash freeze. By correlating these records, researchers are moving beyond the century or the decade and are now able to pinpoint the likely season of the cataclysm. Evidence from the growth patterns in that final year suggests the event occurred in late spring or early summer in the northern hemisphere, the very time when plants and animals were most vulnerable, and when human communities would have been relying on the promise of a new season's abundance. This precision transforms the event from a vague, ancient tragedy into a specific moment in time. We can now understand it not as a legend, but as a historical fact with a date, a season, and a terrifyingly clear sequence of aftermath. The planet's own diaries, written in ice and wood, are confirming the story piece by piece, turning myth into measurable data. The search for physical proof is now looking to the sky for answers. Our most powerful tools in this quest are not shovels or brushes, but orbiting satellites and airborne lasers, technologies that allow us to see through the veil of time and vegetation. This field, known as satellite archaeology or remote sensing, transforms our entire planet into a potential dig site. From hundreds of miles in space, specialized cameras can detect subtle variations in soil moisture, plant health, and surface topography. A buried stone wall, for instance, will affect how plants grow above it, often creating a faint, geometric shadow in the landscape visible only from above. These techniques have already identified countless forgotten roads, farm boundaries, and even the outlines of entire settlements, turning random fields into open history books. But the real game changer operates at a lower altitude. It is called light detection and ranging, or LiDAR for short. Imagine flying over a dense rainforest with a device that fires millions of laser pulses every second toward the ground. Each pulse travels down, hits whatever is below, a leaf, a branch, the earth itself, and bounces back to a sensor. By calculating the time each pulse takes to return, a computer can strip away the vegetation digitally, revealing a pristine, three-dimensional map of the ground surface beneath. The results have been nothing short of revolutionary. In the jungles of Central America, LiDAR has unveiled sprawling Maya metropolises with thousands of structures, complex road networks, and elaborate irrigation systems, all hidden for centuries under an unbroken green canopy. In the Amazon basin, long thought to be a wilderness untouched by large-scale societies, LiDAR has revealed vast geometric earthworks and interconnected settlements, proving that complex cultures once flourished there, managing the environment in ways we are only beginning to understand. These discoveries shatter old assumptions and demonstrate that our planet still holds profound secrets, invisible to the naked eye. Now, apply this formidable technology to the mystery of the cataclysm. Archaeologists and geologists are beginning to use LiDAR to scan regions identified as potential impact zones or along those ancient, drowned coastlines. The goal is to find the signature that has so far remained elusive. In heavily forested areas of North America or Europe, a large, circular depression, the ghost of a crater long since filled with sediment and overgrown, might finally reveal itself in the laser data. More tantalizing still is the prospect of scanning the shallow continental shelves. While seawater blocks lie DAR, advanced sonar and bathymetric mapping can serve a similar purpose, creating detailed images of the seafloor. One day, these tools may uncover the geometric patterns of foundations, the straight lines of canals, or the arranged stones of a ceremonial center, all preserved in the silent darkness below the waves. This would be the tangible proof, the sunken city that turns a compelling hypothesis into documented history. The technology offers a quiet promise that the answers we seek are not lost, merely waiting for the right light to shine upon them. The sky had not just turned cold, it had turned against them. For the scattered bands of humanity who endured the fire and the long winter, the psychological aftershock would have been as devastating as the physical destruction. Their entire reality, built upon generations of understanding the rhythms of nature, had been violently upended in a single day. The sun dimmed by a global shroud of ash, the familiar constellations perhaps obscured by strange, luminous phenomena, the very ground trembling and burning. This was not a natural disaster as we understand it today. To the human mind of 12,800 years ago, this could only be one thing: the wrath of a conscious universe, a punishment from powers beyond comprehension. The trauma of witnessing such an event would have fundamentally rewired our ancestors' relationship with the cosmos, seeding a deep and enduring need to explain, to appease, and to control. This profound shift is etched into the archaeological record that emerges from the long shadow of the younger Dryas. Before the Cataclysm, evidence of human spirituality points largely toward shamanistic practices, intimate and personal connections with the spirit world, often mediated through individual vision quests or communal rituals focused on hunting and fertility. But in the millennia that follow, a new pattern emerges, one of collective, organized effort directed toward the heavens. The monumental architecture of Göbekli Tepe is the clearest signal. Its construction required a massive, coordinated labor force united by a shared belief so powerful it compelled them to carve multi-ton pillars and arrange them with celestial precision. This was not a shrine for a local spirit. It was a temple built for gods who lived in the sky, a permanent, physical plea for order and protection. The shift represents a move from spirituality that worked within nature to religion that sought to negotiate with the powers above it. The driving force behind this transformation was likely a desperate need for meaning. After experiencing a world that could end on a whim, the old explanations were insufficient. Why did the sun grow weak? Why did the animals vanish? The only answer that made sense to a traumatized psyche was that humanity had somehow failed, that it had broken a sacred covenant with the forces that governed reality. This belief would have birthed a new and solemn responsibility, the duty to atone. We see echoes of this in the cultural practices that solidify in the following ages. The concept of sacrifice, of offering something precious to regain favor, becomes widespread. This might explain the careful burial of valuable goods, the dedication of immense resources to temple building instead of immediate survival, and later, in some cultures, more solemn practices. These were not acts of cruelty but of profound existential bargaining. If the sky could send fire, perhaps it could also be persuaded to send rain, to bring back the game, to spare them from another cataclysm. Ritual became a technology for managing cosmic fear. This collective trauma may have been the crucible that forged the very idea of organized priesthood and structured myth. Someone had to be the keeper of the calendar that predicted celestial movements, to perform the correct ceremonies at the correct times, to interpret omens and maintain the rituals that kept the world in balance. The stories that explain the disaster evolved from personal accounts into sacred narratives, the foundation of mythologies where gods battled serpents of chaos in the heavens, where floods cleansed the world of sin, and where humanity lived under a conditional lease, its safety dependent on proper worship. The universe was no longer a home, it was a courtroom, and humanity needed skilled advocates. In this light, the great religious monuments that rise across the globe in the millennia after the Cataclysm, the stone circles, the first ziggurats, the pyramids, can be seen not merely as symbols of power, but as monuments to anxiety and hope. They are architectural prayers born from a memory so terrifying it compelled survivors to build toward the sky, to create order from stone where the cosmos had shown only chaos. The legacy of that day is not just in the platinum layer or the lost coastlines, but in the very architecture of human belief, in our enduring need to find meaning in the stars and protection from the darkness between them. That ancient trauma carved into stone and myth forces us to look at our own world with new eyes. The collapse of a previous chapter in the human story is not just an archaeological mystery, it is a case study in systemic fragility. It demonstrates with terrifying clarity how interconnected systems, whether ecological, climatic, or social, can unravel with shocking speed when struck by a shock they were never designed to absorb. The stable climate, the abundant megafauna, the early networks of human culture, all appeared robust until a single external event exposed their profound vulnerability. The dominoes fell in a cascade, one collapse triggering the next, until the entire structure of that world was reset. This historical pattern holds a sobering mirror to our modern, hyper-connected civilization. We too have built a world of immense complexity and interdependence, a global network of trade, communication, and resource flows that is a marvel of human ingenuity. Yet, like that ancient world, it may be more fragile than we dare admit. Our systems are optimized for efficiency and growth, not necessarily for resilience in the face of a sudden, planet-scale disruption. The lesson from 12,800 years ago is not that collapse is inevitable, but that it is a possibility we must consciously guard against by designing buffers and redundancies into the very fabric of our society. Yet within that story of collapse lies an even more powerful narrative, one of breathtaking human resilience. The survivors of that global cataclysm faced a world stripped bare. Their numbers had crashed, their knowledge was fragmented, their gods had seemingly abandoned them, and yet they did not vanish, they adapted. In the face of impossible hardship, they innovated. They looked at the few remaining plants and animals and began the patient, generations-long work of domestication. They gathered at places like Göbekli Tepe to forge new social bonds and a shared identity. They preserved the most critical pieces of their astronomical knowledge, encoding it in myth and monument. Their recovery was not a return to what was lost, but a creative rebuilding, a slow and stubborn forging of a new way forward from the ashes of the old. This resilience is our shared inheritance. It tells us that the human capacity for adaptation and cooperation is our greatest survival tool, one that has been tested in the most extreme crucible imaginable and proven to endure. In an age of our own planetary challenges, from climate change to the potential of future cosmic threats, this ancient history shifts from academic curiosity to urgent parable. It urges us to consider our own vulnerability with clear eyes and to act not from fear but from foresight. We can apply the lessons of the past by consciously building resilience into our future. This means developing decentralized and diverse food systems that are not vulnerable to a single point of failure. It means preserving our collective knowledge, our science, our culture, in multiple, redundant forms, ensuring that no single disaster can erase the library of human achievement. Most critically, it underscores the necessity of global cooperation. The cataclysm of the past was a threat that knew no borders, and the challenges we face today are similarly universal. The survival and flourishing of our species may well depend on our ability to see ourselves not as competing nations, but as a single crew on a planetary ship, working together to navigate the unpredictable seas of deep time. The story of the Great Reset is ultimately a story about memory and choice. Will we listen to the whispers from the past and build a world resilient enough to weather the storms to come? The remnants of a lost world may not look like rusted steel or shattered glass. If a sophisticated culture was erased 12,800 years ago, its greatest technological achievements might have been forged not from metal, but from stone, water, and a profound understanding of the earth itself. Without the industrial framework we recognize, their advancement could have taken a radically different path, one focused on harmonizing with natural forces rather than conquering them. This would be a technology of alignment and resonance, of massive scale and subtle precision, leaving behind monuments we struggle to explain even with our modern tools. At the high-altitude plains of Bolivia lies one of the planet's most perplexing sights, Puma Punku. Here, scattered like a giant's discarded toy blocks, are stone slabs of andesite and red sandstone, some weighing over 100 tons. What stuns researchers is not their size but their craftsmanship. These stones are cut with geometric perfection, featuring razor-sharp edges, flawless right angles, and intricate, interlocking channels that look as if they were milled by a machine. The surfaces are so smooth they feel like glass, and the precision of the drill holes and notches suggests the use of tools and techniques far beyond simple hammerstones. The official narrative attributes this to the Tiwanaku culture, which flourished over 1,000 years ago. Yet, some of these blocks appear weathered, shifted, and shattered by a cataclysmic event, perhaps a massive flood or seismic upheaval that predates the Tiwanaku by millennia. Could Puma Punku be the skeletal ruins of a much older, repurposed site, its original builders and their methods lost to time? The technology on display here suggests a masterful command of stonework, possibly involving methods we have forgotten, like the use of specific vibrational frequencies to soften rock or plant-based chemical agents that could dissolve stone for precise shaping. It points to a knowledge system where engineering and natural science were inseparable. Far across the Pacific, another enigma rests beneath the waves off the coast of Yonaguni Island, Japan. Here, divers have documented vast stepped terraces, straight walls that meet at perfect 90-degree angles, and what appear to be carved pillars and staircases, all submerged in over 80 feet of water. Mainstream geologists argue these are natural sandstone formations, shaped by tidal forces and fracturing along existing plains. Yet, the sheer accumulation of geometric features in one location challenges that view. The monolithic structure, with its twin pillars and what looks like a carved face, seems deliberately placed. If human hands did shape Yonaguni, the timeline is the true mystery. For these structures to be above water for construction, sea levels would have had to be dramatically lower, placing their origin at the end of the last ice age, over 12,000 years ago. This submerged complex, whether partially natural and enhanced or wholly crafted, stands as a potential monument from a time when coastlines were miles farther out, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of a drowned world. The technology of such a culture might not have been about creating new materials, but about mastering the ones at hand. Imagine a society that developed an advanced science of acoustics. Certain ancient chambers, like those in some pyramids or underground temples, are known to resonate at specific frequencies that can affect human consciousness, perhaps used for healing or ceremonial focus. They might have used sound combined with precise celestial alignments to create spaces of powerful energy and meaning. Their water management could have been equally sublime, not just irrigation canals, but a holistic understanding of underground aquifers, natural telluric currents, and the use of megalithic structures to channel and purify water through harmonic vibration. This is a vision of technology as applied wisdom, where the greatest achievement was not a tool but an understanding, a seamless integration with the planet's own systems. We are so accustomed to progress measured in gears and engines that we might walk right past its remnants, dismissing a perfectly fitted 100-ton wall as mere primitive effort. The true legacy of a pre-cataclysm world may be hidden in plain sight, in the silent, enduring language of stone and star, waiting for us to learn how to read it again. Beneath the rolling grey waves of the North Sea, a lost continent sleeps. For thousands of years after the ice retreated, a vast and fertile plain known as Doggerland connected the British Isles to mainland Europe. This was no barren tundra, but a rich, low-lying heartland of forests, rivers, and marshes teeming with life. Herds of reindeer and aurochs roamed its hills, while Mesolithic hunter-gatherer communities made their homes along its lagoons and coasts, leaving behind the scattered tools and hearths that modern trawlers occasionally dredge up from the seafloor. This was a real, populated world, a central part of the European story, and then, slowly and inexorably, the water claimed it all. As the great ice sheets melted, global sea levels rose, drowning Doggerland foot by foot, mile by mile, over centuries. The inhabitants would have witnessed a relentless, generational retreat, watching their familiar hunting grounds and ancestral lands vanish beneath the advancing tide. This gradual drowning is a documented geological fact, a sobering lesson in how rising seas can erase geography. But the story of Doggerland's end may hold a more dramatic and more instructive final chapter. Around 8,200 years ago, a catastrophic event occurred off the coast of Norway. A massive section of the continental shelf, known as the Storegga Slide, collapsed. An area of seabed the size of Scotland broke away and plunged into the deep ocean, triggering a monumental tsunami. Waves estimated to be over 60 feet high raced across the North Sea. When they reached the remaining low-lying islands and coasts of Doggerland, the effect would have been apocalyptic. The surge would have scoured the landscape, drowning any remaining communities, sweeping away forests, and utterly reshaping the final remnants of that once great plain. Sediment cores taken from the seafloor in the region show a distinct layer of sand and rubble, deposited far from shore, consistent with a tsunami of this scale. This event provides a powerful and more recent model for how the cataclysm 12,800 years ago could have operated on a global scale. Imagine the Storegga Slide event, but multiplied 100-fold in energy and occurring not in isolation, but as part of a swarm of impacts and airbursts. If cosmic fragments struck the remaining northern ice sheets or the oceans, they could have triggered underwater landslides far larger than Storegga, or generated mega-tsunamis that would have circumnavigated the globe. The coastlines of that ancient world, which extended hundreds of miles beyond today's shores, would have been hit by walls of water of unimaginable height and force. Any settlements, any cultures that had developed along those fertile, now drowned continental shelves would have been erased in a single, terrible day. Their lands would have been submerged not over generations but in hours. The Doggerland tsunami shows us the mechanism. A single geological instability can deliver a coup de grace to a landscape already under siege from rising seas. The global cataclysm would have been that mechanism unleashed worldwide, a rapid, violent punctuation mark at the end of the Ice Age. It transforms the slow-motion drowning of coastal regions into a sudden and total obliteration. This helps solve a persistent puzzle. If advanced coastal societies existed before the younger Dryas, why have we found no trace? The answer may be that we have been looking in the wrong place. Their remains are not buried under desert sands or jungle canopies, but under hundreds of feet of water and millennia of marine sediment, scattered and buried by tsunamis far more powerful than Storegga. Doggerland's fate, even in its more recent and smaller scale tragedy, gives us a glimpse of the process. It shows how a thriving human landscape can be first squeezed by environmental change and then shattered by a sudden geological shock, leaving behind only a ghost in the sonar data and a handful of stone tools in a fisherman's net. It is a stark reminder that the map of human history is not just missing pages, but entire sunken continents. The enduring power of a symbol lies in its ability to condense an entire worldview into a single, unforgettable image. Across the ancient world, two such symbols emerge again and again, speaking a silent language of loss and hope. The first is the phoenix, that magnificent bird of fire that, at the end of its long life, builds a nest of aromatic wood, ignites it, and is consumed by the flames. Yet from those very ashes, a new, young phoenix rises, reborn and renewed. This is not merely a story about a magical creature. It is a profound metaphor for the human experience after the cataclysm. A civilization, a way of life, is burned away in a global conflagration, reduced to ashes. But from that utter devastation, from the scattered survivors and the fragments of forgotten knowledge, something new and vital slowly emerges. The phoenix does not represent a simple return, but a transformation. The old world is gone, but its essence provides the fertile ground from which a new world must grow. It is a story of resilience coded into myth, a promise that even total destruction is not the final word. Alongside the phoenix coils another ancient symbol, the Ouroboros. This is the serpent or dragon forming a perfect circle by swallowing its own tail. Found in Egyptian iconography, Gnostic texts, and later in alchemical manuscripts, it represents the eternal cycle, the idea that every ending contains the seed of a new beginning, and every beginning carries within it the momentum toward its own end. Time is not a straight line marching from past to future, but a wheel, a loop, a self-sustaining process of death and regeneration. When we layer this symbol over the geological and archaeological record, its meaning deepens. The cataclysm was an ending, a cosmic bite that severed one age of the world, but that very act of destruction set in motion the conditions for the next age, the Neolithic rebirth, the rise of agriculture and new social orders. The Ouroboros suggests this is not a unique event but part of a grand, perhaps terrifying, rhythm. Endings are beginnings, winter gives way to spring. Darkness is followed by dawn. What is truly striking is how these symbols are not confined to one culture or one corner of the globe. They are universal archetypes. The phoenix has its roots in Egyptian and Greek tradition, but the core idea of a being reborn from destruction appears in the Chinese fenghuang, in the Slavic firebird, and in the legends of the Americas. The Ouroboros appears in ancient Mesoamerican art as the plumed serpent, a symbol of infinity and cyclic time. This widespread resonance is the key. It is highly unlikely that these isolated cultures all independently invented such a specific and complex metaphor. It is far more probable that they are each giving voice to a shared, deep-seated memory, a cultural scar passed down through generations. The trauma of the cataclysm was so profound that it demanded a philosophical and spiritual framework to make it bearable. The human mind, in its search for meaning, crafted these symbols. They are a way of saying, we have seen the world end, we have felt the fire and the ice. And yet here we are, life continues, the story goes on. These symbols represent the ultimate human response to catastrophe, not just survival, but the creation of meaning from chaos. The phoenix and the Ouroboros are more than art, they are psychological tools. They transform a random, terrifying act of cosmic violence into a narrative with purpose. They teach that destruction is not meaningless but part of a larger, cyclical order. This philosophical leap allowed survivors and their descendants to move forward not just with fear, but with a fragile hope. It allowed them to build their Göbekli teeps and align their stones to the stars, not as acts of despair, but as acts of faith in the cycle itself, a belief that their new beginning was sacred and part of an eternal pattern. In these ancient symbols, we see our ancestors doing more than remembering a disaster. We see them mastering it, weaving it into the very fabric of their understanding of existence, ensuring that the memory of the end would always carry the promise of a new dawn. This convergence of evidence from wildly different fields is what makes the hypothesis so compelling. It is a rare moment in science where a single idea can illuminate a dozen separate mysteries at once. The genetic bottleneck in our DNA, the thin layer of platinum in the soil, the sudden silence where mammoths once walked, and the universal chorus of flood myths, these are not random fragments from unrelated disciplines. They are the scattered pieces of a single, shattered mosaic. When you begin to fit them together, a startling picture emerges. The geneticist studying a population crash, the geologist analyzing a sediment core, the archaeologist noting the disappearance of a tool tradition, and the folklorist recording an ancient deluge story are, in fact, all studying different aspects of the same world-altering day. They are each holding a piece of the truth, but it is only when their work is combined that the full story can be read. This is the profound power of interdisciplinary synthesis. It breaks down the walls between specialties and asks us to see the past as a whole, interconnected system. Modern academia often encourages deep specialization, drilling down into ever narrower fields of study. This yields incredible detail, but it can also blind us to the larger patterns that stretch across those artificial boundaries. The story of the Great Reset demands that we step back and look at the entire canvas. It requires the climatologist to talk to the mythologist, and the geneticist to consider the archaeologist's timeline. This holistic approach acknowledges that human history is not just a sequence of events written in stone or parchment. It is also written in our genes, in the layers of the earth, and in the stories we tell to make sense of our place in the cosmos. The Cataclysm hypothesis acts as a unifying framework, a narrative thread that weaves these disparate strands of evidence into a coherent tapestry. It demonstrates that understanding our deepest past is not a task for one field alone, but a collaborative endeavor that must blend the hard data of ice cores and DNA with the softer, but no less real, data of human memory and cultural expression. The flood myths are not mere fairy tales to be dismissed by science, they are cultural fossils, preserving the shape of a traumatic historical event. The platinum layer is not just a chemical anomaly, it is the cosmic signature that gives those myths a physical cause. By refusing to separate the scientific from the symbolic, we gain a richer, more human understanding of what our ancestors endured and how they forged a new world from the ashes of the old. This synthesis challenges us to think bigger, to connect the dots across time and discipline, and to listen to the many different ways the Earth and its people remember. The true test of any scientific idea lies not in the evidence we have, but in the evidence we have yet to find. The investigation into this ancient cataclysm is entering a new and decisive phase, driven by technologies that would seem like magic to the survivors of that long winter. The next chapter of this story will be written by drills, lasers, and algorithms, peeling back layers of time to seek definitive answers. One of the most tantalizing targets remains hidden under a mile of ice in Greenland. The Hiawatha crater, with its vast circular structure, is a prime candidate for a direct strike. Future expeditions aim to drill through the glacier to reach the crater floor itself, retrieving pristine samples of the rock that was shattered on that day. Analyzing this material could provide an unambiguous impact signature, a smoking gun locked in ice for 12,800 years. Simultaneously, a global network of researchers continues to sift through the planet's memory, collecting sediment cores from ancient lakebeds and ocean floors on every continent. They are searching not just for more platinum and nanodiamonds, but for a whole suite of chemical proxies, like unique isotopes of helium or osmium, that can only originate from beyond our world. Each new core is a time capsule, and finding the same extraterrestrial fingerprint in samples from Asia, Africa, and South America would build an irrefutable case for a truly global event. Perhaps the most profound search, however, will not be on land but beneath the sea. The lost continental shelves, those vast coastal plains where early societies may have thrived, represent the ultimate archaeological frontier. Advanced sonar mapping and remotely operated vehicles are now capable of scanning the seafloor with incredible detail, identifying unnatural shapes and patterns hidden under centuries of silt. The goal is to find what the cataclysm and the rising seas supposedly erased, the physical foundations of a forgotten world. A single discovery of a structured monument or a patterned settlement on a drowned shelf would transform the hypothesis from a compelling theory into a historical fact, rewriting the human story in an instant. Alongside these physical searches, our digital tools are growing more powerful. As dating techniques achieve even greater precision, we may be able to pinpoint the event not just to a century, but to a specific year or even a season. Supercomputers can now run complex simulations that model the trajectory of a fragmented comet, the physics of continent-scale airbursts, and the cascading collapse of the climate system. We may soon watch a detailed digital reconstruction of that fateful day, seeing how the fireballs rained down and how the shockwaves traveled across the globe. The coming decade promises a revolution in our understanding. Each drill core, each sonar scan, each new simulation is a question posed to the past. The answers will either solidify the cataclysm as a confirmed event in Earth's biography, or they will reveal a different, perhaps even more complex, explanation for the sudden winter, the vanished giants, and the reset of human culture. This is the thrilling uncertainty of true discovery, the recognition that our past is not a settled record, but a living puzzle. The silent layers of ice and sediment, and the dark waters over the sunken lands hold secrets they have kept for millennia. We are finally learning how to ask them the right questions. That question lingers long after the evidence is examined. If our ancestors endured a world-shattering event, what does that make us? The traditional narrative of human history is a story of ascent, a steady climb from simple hunter-gatherers to masters of the globe. We see ourselves as the pinnacle, the first and only civilization to achieve true complexity. But this new evidence suggests a different story, one not of a straight line but of a spiral. Imagine progress not as a ladder we climb rung by rung, but as a wheel that turns. A culture reaches a point of great knowledge and cohesion, only to be struck down by forces beyond its control. The wheel turns and a long period of darkness follows. Then, slowly, from the scattered seeds of the old world, a new growth begins, reaching upward once more, perhaps in a different direction, guided by the fragmented memories of what came before. We may not be the first chapter in this book, but merely the most recent. This idea profoundly humbles our modern sense of superiority. We look at the precision of Göbekli Tepe's pillars or the celestial knowledge encoded in ancient myths and realize these were not primitive guesses. They were the work of keen, observant minds, individuals who faced existential challenges we can scarcely comprehend and responded with monuments of stone and story. Their wisdom, born from surviving a cosmic disaster, may hold insights we have overlooked in our rush toward technological mastery. Perhaps they understood something fundamental about living in balance with a planet that is both our home and a participant in a violent cosmic neighborhood. This expanded timeline also reshapes our sense of human potential. If a sophisticated culture was reset 12,800 years ago, it means the human capacity for complex society, astronomy, engineering, and art is not a recent invention. It is a deep-seated trait that has emerged, been tested, and re-emerged across the millennia. Our current global civilization, for all its dazzling technology, is just one expression of that enduring potential. This perspective invites a deeper respect for ancient traditions and indigenous knowledge systems, not as quaint folklore, but as long-term data streams, repositories of hard-won wisdom about climate patterns, ecological management, and community resilience. They are the whispers of survivors who learned the cost of forgetting. Ultimately, this mystery asks us to reconsider our place in a grander order. We are not separate from the Earth's history or the solar system's dynamics. We are participants in a story that includes ice ages and comet showers, rising seas and falling skies. Recognizing that our world can be reshaped in a day fosters a necessary humility and a more cautious stewardship. It reminds us that our security is fragile, built upon a thin layer of stability that has been broken before. This is not a message of fear, but of clarity. It encourages us to build not just for growth and efficiency, but for resilience and continuity, to preserve our collective knowledge across generations, and to look to the stars not just with ambition, but with a watchful eye. We are the children of those who endured the great winter. Their legacy is not just in our genes, but in the quiet, persistent question they left for us, echoing through the ages. What will we build, and how will we ensure it lasts? The journey ends not with a final answer, but with a transformed perspective. We have walked across a landscape scarred by cosmic fire and sculpted by ancient ice, from the microscopic glitter of nanodiamonds to the silent, monumental circles of Göbekli Tepe. The story these clues tell is one of profound disruption, a day when the sky fell and a long winter began. This hypothesis of a global cataclysm 12,800 years ago weaves together threads from geology, genetics, archaeology, and myth into a single, breathtaking tapestry. It is a narrative that remains fiercely debated, a scientific frontier where every new core sample and satellite scan can shift the ground beneath our feet. Yet its true power may lie less in its final proof and more in the questions it forces us to ask. It challenges the very framework of human history, inviting us to replace a simple story of linear progress with a far more dramatic epic of collapse and rebirth. Our past becomes a story of resilience written against a backdrop of cosmic indifference, where survival itself was the greatest innovation. The pursuit of this mystery, regardless of its ultimate conclusion, fundamentally enriches our understanding. It teaches us to see Earth not as a static stage, but as a dynamic, sometimes violent participant in our story. It reveals humanity not as a recent arrival destined for dominion, but as a tenacious species whose deepest cultural memories and greatest monuments might be rooted in a collective trauma and a hard-won recovery. This search compels a humble awe, a recognition that the ground we stand upon and the skies we gaze toward hold stories far older and more astonishing than we once dared to believe. As we continue to look to the stars with our telescopes and dig into the Earth with our tools, we are not just seeking data. We are continuing the most ancient human quest of all, to understand where we came from, the forces that shaped us, and what it means to build a future in a universe of both beauty and unimaginable power. The stones and the stories are waiting, and the conversation between our past and our potential has only just begun.